It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Tuesday, April 18th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that, Danny Briere, John Tortorella, lots to dig into from their season in review.
Oh yeah, there's plenty.
Yeah, we're going to do that. Plus, talk about the Phantoms Calder Cup playoffs kickoff tonight.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on Twitter at Sportsology. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon today to get started. You can subscribe or follow Locked On Flyers for free on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Yesterday, Russ, we had the season postmortem from the interim GM, Danny Briere, and the head coach, John Tortorella. And, I think having the two of them on a separate day and together, at first I was like, oh, what are they doing here? It's a little weird. I liked it now because I felt like there was a little bit more breathing room and to kind of take what each of them had to say, compare to each other, and kind of given the context of what the players said last week. I actually really liked how they did this.
Yeah, I didn't mind how they did it. Although they met, before we even got there, so clearly they were trying to get their messaging straight. And don't fool yourself. Uh, it's still run by a corporation, so messaging is important. There were some key things with that. So, but as far as to cover, no, it was fine. They did a good job.
Yeah, and I just think like having the context of what some of the players said, to bring into
Yes.
these conversation was really important. I think, for me, the top line thing that came out of it was kind of the little small differences in what John Tortorella meant by the team culture versus accountability and a standard that he talked about at the beginning of the season. And it's easy to talk about it when you haven't done it yet, but now that we've had the whole season, um, you know, the way that John Tortorella was deliberately vague about individual players on that front, which is understandable to a large degree.
Well, for some it
In
is,
some,
for some it
for
isn't.
it's true, and that's where other questions kind of gave some hints to some of that. But
Yeah.
the fact that I think, to your point, they got their messaging straight because I think Danny Briere was like right on message with the same kind of answer on that front.
Yeah. So, you know, is the team harder to play against? Sure. Do they try more than they did last year? Yes. But these are the most basic things you ask from a hockey player when they sign a pro contract. Those are the two most basic things. So, yes, he's accomplished that. Um, I don't care that they got more wins because I think next year they'll get fewer wins. Wins isn't important right now. Uh, I think what's important is that he still sees problems, and he actually was saying some oxymorons, even though he didn't realize it. So um, when we get to the defense, that's when I'll talk about that. But as far as just the overall, I think it's odd that he doesn't do any interviews at the end. He doesn't do any of the exit interviews. It's almost like he doesn't want to hear the complaints. That's, if you ask me, that's what it is.
Which one, Torts?
Torts. He should be sitting in on the exit interviews too, but he didn't because he doesn't do that. And it's like, okay, but what basically here is my problem. There is a nuance to I have an open door. You can come here every time. To I have an open door policy. When you have an open door policy, people will come in all the time because they know there's no fear of reprisal or anything like that. John says my door is always open, but the problem is players one worry that once they go through that open door, is that going to create another problem for them? And that's the difference. And John doesn't see it, but I see it and others see it. And it was talked about yesterday on Twitter because that's a nuanced thing. And again, so like even for someone like Kevin Hayes, I don't blame him for not going through and walking through that open door because he's been around long enough where he knows what's going on. And like the coach says, I'm not going to chase them around the building. Really? Do you have to chase them around the building? They're right there in practice. All you'd have to do is walk aside and say, at the end of practice, hey, let's get this straight. But they never did. They never even attempted to.
Okay, but the communication is a separate issue, which we can talk about, but I'm
We're
talking
going to have
about
to because he thinks it's good, and I think
No,
it's not.
absolutely. I'm just bringing up the topic of
Yeah.
building team culture and
It's a
accountability
little better.
and a standard, and in terms of what he was able to accomplish on that front.
It's a little better as far as the culture. Uh, Obviously, it's not perfect, or Tony D'Angelo wouldn't have sat out 5 games. So clearly, he broke the culture. Uh, Accountability is a little better, I think. But even to his own admission, players aren't accountable enough there for his liking. But I'm going to
Right.
have a newsflash for you: players aren't going to be accountable for his liking for this whole era of players. So I think he's going to have to adjust on that one.
Yeah, and I think that's a key part of it, that what, player behavior is like and player expectations is very different now. And so is he gonna get that standard? I don't think so, but is he gonna get a better standard? Yes, and I think he has done that to a large degree. I do think that, you do see it in the effort. You do see it in terms of, I think guys are upset when they're benched because of bad play, but I think that they understand that that's a part of having John Tortorella as your coach.
Right, but
And I could see that from both sides
yes, but let me
of
interject
the
this
story.
because we've all been around this corporate team building stuff, and sometimes it can work. And I'll tell you in a case where it can work. Again, if the team says, "Hey, coach, come out with us to Dave and Buster's," what's it going to hurt if John Tortorella does a few popping shots with the guys? You know what I mean? But if he does that, they'll be like, "Oh, okay, look at this other side of Torts that we didn't know existed." But he's like, "No, no, we're not going there," like a curmudgeon. Like, why? That's what your players want. Why can't you oblige? You're asking them to change everything they do about the way they're playing. Why can't you do that for them?
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I don't know if that is the specific example I would bring up.
As an example, yeah.
Yeah, like to meet them, maybe not halfway, but a quarter of the way
Yeah.
there. I think that's valid. But back to your point about communication, yeah, I thought it was really interesting that he said that the onus is on the players to get one-on-one time with him off the ice. That he always starts a discussion about on ice play in group settings with the assistant coaches. And I think that, yeah, again, that is, to your point, an open door without really having an open door, because you don't know what the implications are of continuing that conversation. But I think he really, he said that he appreciates a good conflict and a back and forth, but I think he wants it done in front of everybody. Like
He
he
does.
wants,
And not everybody
and
wants to do that as a human being.
yeah, and I think that's the important difference here, is that, he mentions like, oh, a couple of times this year, like guys came at me in front of the group and had issues with what I had to say. And, I appreciate that because it puts you in a vulnerable position. It puts me in a vulnerable position. And that's how we work things out. But yeah, I think some people communicate better one-on-one, and you have to be
Yeah.
able to recognize that and accept it, and not have it be like an unconscious negative. And I
Especially a
think that's
younger
what it
player who
is.
doesn't have a history of dealing with that kind of culture isn't going
Right.
to speak up. They're not. They're just going to try and fit in.
Yeah, I do think that is an issue. And I think that there is nuance. And if he really wants to get to know these guys on an individual level, like he says, he has to understand that they communicate differently. And, like you said, in corporate land, I've been a project manager. You have to communicate to different team members in different ways to get them to get things done. And that's just the way it is. And so I think he needs to adjust to that a little bit.
Yeah, like at camp, as an example, why not schedule a meeting with every single person, every single player on the team? And just to kind of like shoot it, like, hey, how was your summer? What did you do? Don't worry, we're not even going to talk about hockey. Just as people. He won't do
Yeah.
that.
Well, I don't know that. I
Yes, you
honestly
do.
don't know that.
Yes, you do.
Well, I don't. Maybe
Okay.
he does that and we don't know. So,
I don't think he does that. Sorry.
I think he has a public persona to maintain, and that he probably does some things like that that we don't
Well, I
know
think
about.
he does them on the ice in the hallway, sure. But I don't think he actually schedules time for that. No. No, I don't believe he does.
All right. Well, we've got a lot more to talk about, plus what Danny Briere had to say, and we are going to do that coming up next.
Grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back, and there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. That's because right now new customers can step up to the plate with a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up and place your first bet, and get to up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. Maybe bet on Pete Alonso hitting another homer. He's doing quite a bit. Maybe bet on the Cardinals over the Diamondbacks today with Jordan Montgomery going and maybe taking his over on strikeouts because he strikes out a lot of guys. Those are some pretty good bets, I think. So don't miss your chance to get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 where you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked on to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
Thanks for listening to Locked On Flyers. We will be having our mailbag on tomorrow's show, as well as our own end of season awards that are maybe a little different than the ones that the Flyers handed out. Plus, our prospect catch up will be on Thursday. So, continuing our discussion on John Tortorella and Danny Briere's post-mortem for this season, I think, one more aspect to what John Tortorella had to say, and this goes along the lines of not understanding how the game has changed in terms of culture, is, and he has said this before, this is not new, that people are too sensitive to the benchings in terms of like external people are reading too much into it, and that people are too sensitive about it. And, it's surprising to him. But, I think that he is definitely on the wrong side of this in terms of, his expectation. And that goes again to just him not being kind of up on what current hockey culture is like in terms of on ice discipline and all of that. And, the fact that he wouldn't talk about the Tony D'Angelo situation. Tony D'Angelo didn't really talk about it too much in detail. Danny
All he
Briere
did
didn't
was
want to talk about it.
Yeah, D'Angelo just tried to clean up his image because I think what happened here is I think the Flyers tried to shop him already just to see if there's what interest was there in him, and there probably wasn't much, if any. And that's why I think Torts said, "Well, I think we could work this out," because I don't think he
Mhm.
has a choice.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility for sure. I
Yeah.
think that that was very clear. The other thing, and this kind of segues to talking about what Danny Briere has to say a little bit,
Wait,
is
hurry up on
that
this first thing. So on the defense,
yeah.
he had mentioned that it's not where he wants it to be, as far as the way they play and everything else. But there's spots open, and he wants young guys up there. It can't be both ways towards because if you want the play to be better defensively and you want these certain things to do it, when you bring up the young guys, they're not going to do it for a while. And so I think he does. I don't even think he realizes. I think he's trying to say what the team wants him to say as far as playing the younger players. But I still think there's a conflict in his mind about how he's going to do that, especially on the blue line. Because again, nobody's ready when they come up to play on the blue line in the NHL. It's rare. It does happen, but it hasn't happened for the Flyers. Even York took a lot of work.
Yeah, and I think that the way that you kind of thread that needle is say that's the goal and you want the young players to come up. And so the goal is for by the end of next season when
Yes.
they're complete. And I think that's really what he was saying there,
Okay.
that for next year he wants the young guys to come up and as part of that we'll build a more stable defensive like blue line
You said it a
side
lot
of it.
clearer than he did. I will say that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't I think what you're saying made sense in terms of what he said, like the words, but that was my impression
Okay.
of of what he meant by that. But um talking about the time he spent in the press box as opposed to on the bench, which we talked about on the show, pros and cons to it, but it's very perplexing.
Well, no, but
He
now you'll
said,
see the benefit. I saw the benefit of it for John's sake yesterday.
yeah,
And
exactly.
you know what the benefit is? Hold on. The benefit was he met with Danny before we spoke, right, to the media and talked about all the players. And Danny is now mostly in lockstep with John about how he feels about the players. But the problem is you have a third person now that's going to be coming into this. And these two guys are practically in lockstep. That's not a great way to have this new environment for management because whoever you bring in, especially if it's a conflicting personality, now that person has to battle the both of you because you're kind of in lockstep and that's predetermined. That's not good.
Well, I don't know that that's what I took away
Oh no, that's
from
what a lot of us took
all
away
of
only
this.
because he was trying to curry favor with Danny and it worked.
Yeah, I mean, what I was gonna get into is that this time in the press box with Danny moved the evaluation process forward, which is, kind of what you're saying. They
Mhm.
got on the same page, but I do think it's an important part of the process. And on
It
Danny's
is.
side of things, I thought he was very clear that it's not just him, it's not just the two of them, that there will be other people and other voices and that consensus will have to be reached. I was a little concerned about, decision by committee
Yeah, that's
at the
never
same
a
time.
good thing. It isn't.
No, and that's been part of the problem with the Flyers, right? Is there's been too many voices in the room.
And
So
even
I
the
think
Cup, they've been using
that
this committee the whole time.
right. And so I think he has to really change the way he's talking about it and say, I'm the GM, so I will be making the personnel decisions ultimately. But there will be other
Yeah, I'll
voices
listen to
heard.
everybody, but I'm the final say so right here.
Yeah. I think that he wasn't very decisive
No.
about that. And that's something that I think is very important. Now, if he gets the interim tag taken off and then says that, I can understand that too.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. So I did ask him directly about the draft. He misinterpreted part of my question, but I'll explain to both. So I just asked him going into the draft, will there be any additions, any other voices added to the draft table? And he said, no, I like our group. I think they've done a really good job. To me, that's an issue because if I'm a new GM and I've already been around, I still want to bring in somebody and I want that person to interact and look at all the reports and see what they like and don't like and what they could add because clearly the Flyers could do better in the draft. I think everybody in the world can see it and I'm sure they know it to some degree. And the fact that they kind of want to keep it closed is odd because who was the voice that they added to the draft table a couple of years ago? Danny Briere.
Right.
So I thought that was odd. Now, the second question I asked was, will they be trying to gain any other draft picks in this draft? But he took that as, will they trade the first round pick for any other for multiple picks? And he said, most likely they're not going to trade the first round pick for multiple picks. But he didn't answer the other part. So again, that second round pick may never be recouped. But it's good that he said he's probably not trading the pick. So at least fans know that. that's fine. That's that's a good, clear message, and I think that's smart.
Yeah, and I think that it was good for him to clarify that they don't have an answer yet on that compensation pick for Jay O'Brien, like
Oh,
we
why they
talked
don't have an
about,
answer, right?
don't
Well, yeah.
have the answer.
No, no, no. They would have an answer if Jay O'Brien trotted up to the NHL office and said, "I'm a free agent and I'm already signing with these guys," but that never
Yeah.
happens. So that's why it's most likely 2024 because that never happens. And why is Jay O'Brien going to rush to a decision for the Flyers' sake? They didn't do anything for him.
Yep. But I think that the way Danny Briere talked about it,
He was
that it
honest
was
about it, and that was
he
good.
was honest. Yeah. And I appreciated that
Me too.
clarity. I think that when he talked about individual players, which Torts did very little of. I think he mentioned Tyson Forster
Yeah.
and
Oh,
then he
yeah.
mentioned a few guys that had like one-on-one meetings with him as an example of guys who walked through the door. But other than that, he didn't really. But Danny Briere did and talked about TK as a top line player, which makes sense. He was asked about potentially trading him, and he said, "Yeah, it's on the table. Everything's on the table,"
Right.
which is very GM speak.
Yep.
Very honest about Kevin Hayes is a TBD right now. I
Except
thought,
when he says he has great value out there, he doesn't. That's
well,
the
but he
part.
has to say
I
that.
know, but we all
That's
know he doesn't.
I don't have any problem with him saying stuff like that because he's trying to sell
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
players for value. But I thought it was very good that he recognized that Brendan Lemieux like wasn't all that.
Yeah,
That
it was good that he diffused that, yes.
yeah, I thought that was really good. And then when he talked about the younger guys, again, matches what we saw. Elliot Denoye made a good impression. Tyson Forster made a good impression.
One thing didn't
Um,
match up, though.
well, he said that Ollie Lixell had been playing well in Lehigh Valley, but wasn't quite as good for the Flyers. And I think that you could take that away from what happened, except for the fact that Torts didn't give him the right opportunities to
Yeah,
make the good
he would play
impression.
with Delorier and whatever, and he'd only get
Right,
10 minutes a game, like, come on.
right.
That was not fair to Ollie Lixell. It wasn't.
No, and I think, the other thing is that he was specific about individual forwards, but when he talked about the defensive prospects, he lumped them together in a group.
Yeah,
So he's like Zamula, Adder, Yinning, Andre, like all with great potential, excited for the future, but didn't like really parse out which of them he was
it's
more excited
closest,
about than others. Yeah,
which tells you that going into next year, maybe one of them makes it at the beginning of the season, but probably not.
right. I think so. But I don't think that's a bad thing either.
No,
I
no,
think
no. I think it's good, but then I think the problem is with Torts talking about just backfilling. Well, you don't always want to sign 1 year guys to be a mentor to your top prospects, even and at the NHL level. Like you want to sign some guys that can stay around for 2 or 3 years and actually play defense because the ideal scenario is you want a veteran with a young guy on
you
every
want a
pair.
Justin Braun is what
Yeah,
you want.
yeah, but you want that on every pairing, so this way that younger guy can continue to grow. Because we saw what York, playing the right side definitely affected his offense and other parts of his game. You don't, they're not going to pair two young guys even on the third pairing. So that's the part where you hope that it's a little better than a backfill.
So other than that, I would just say that both of them were really cagey, as is to be expected, because
Yeah.
honestly, I think it's the right answer in terms of, won't give a timeline on the future because you can't. I honestly don't
No,
think
but you
you
know
can
what?
right now.
Marcus Hayes was right to ask for that because every
Oh,
team,
sure.
every team in pro sports does it. Steve Eiserman did it. He said just about, well, now it's 4 years ago. It's going to be at least 5 years. That's what he said. And Danny Briere knows that it could be that for him, but is afraid to say it because he doesn't want to lose the fan base. That's the difference. But you could give a timeline if you wanted to. You could. That was their choice.
Yeah, I just think it was the expected choice from them at this
That's fine.
point. And again, until the interim tag is removed, I don't think he's going to be as decisive
No,
as
that's fair. There was one other thing too
as
that
that.
Torts brought up on his own because nobody brought it up, and that was the medical part. And he said he wished that Cam didn't go down the road he did explaining his neck issue. And I talked about that on OMB last night. And those guys have had those same neck surgeries, and they are limiting to some degree. And he had to make a quick decision, or he was going to lose apparently some movement in his arm. So all this isn't great. And now Torch tried to put a Band-Aid by saying it's much better now, but it's not totally fixed, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to tell you something. Take it from me, when you're a fan and you're watching your team and you don't feel like the injuries are being treated right, or they're not coming back soon enough, or they come back too soon, all those things make it very hard for a fan to believe in a club. And these guys have had a year to work on this. And the fact that they're saying it's not really fully fixed yet is an issue. And Torts was trying to get ahead of it, like sometimes corporations do, because nobody brought it up. But you know why nobody brought it up? Because nobody believes it's any good. Still, that's why nobody brought it up. So it's still an issue. And we talked about this last summer, right?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have a Calder Cup playoff preview for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, and we are going to get to that coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by AG1 by Athletic Greens. Spring is here, and you might be trying to get back into a more healthy and active lifestyle, and what better to pair with some new exercise habits than a daily dose of nutritional insurance in the form of AG1. With one delicious scoop of AG1 in a glass of water every day, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, all the things. It's also lifestyle friendly, whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free. AG1 contains less than a gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, but it still tastes great and supports better sleep quality, recovery, mental clarity, and alertness. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. So, Russ, the Lehigh Valley Phantoms are starting the Calder Cup playoffs tonight in Charlotte. And I think that I'm pretty disappointed as to how the season wound up. They had a real chance at getting a home series, but they lost all 3 games this past weekend. And so that put them in the 6th place spot. And the way the Atlantic Division works is the top 2 teams got a bye for the first round, and then the next 4 teams played so it was like 3-6 and 4-5 series against each other. And so that meant that with the Phantoms in the 6 slot, they were playing Charlotte in the 3 slot. And because of AHL travel rules, they don't alternate home games.
Yeah, the penny pinching league that it is.
Yeah, so it has to be within a certain number of miles to go back and forth between the 2 cities, and Charlotte is too far away. So we have the whole first round for the Phantoms in Charlotte, which is kind of a bummer.
But hey, we get the last change in that middle game.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, it's just really upsetting, I think, just because I was looking forward to maybe getting to Allentown for a game.
Fans. It's like you basically are shutting down a whole team's fan base as a result from one bus trip. One bus trip.
So looking at this series against Charlotte, they tied this season series with Charlotte, 4 games won by each team. And, Charlotte is definitely a hit or miss team. Like when they're on, they are very good. And when they're not, they are a mess. And that has been my observation with them this season. They have a couple familiar faces in Jerry Mayhew, and of course Connor
Yeah.
Bunneman, who's been playing there. Their team scoring lead is Riley Nash with 59 points this
Riley Nash
season.
was a good NHLer, so
Yeah, and Logan Hutsko is on that team.
that's a guy I
Lucas,
talked about the Flyers trying to get in a trade because he's been
yeah,
slowly developing. He's got a lot of speed, a lot.
yeah, and then Lucas Carlson is their top defenseman with 54 points, who has more points than any forward on the Phantoms
But
for
they
this
also
season.
added Mackie Samoskevich, who was
Mhm.
terrific for Michigan, had that game-winning goal, has a lot of speed. Samoskevich is gonna be a guy they're really gonna have a hard time covering.
Yeah, so the Phantoms are really gonna have to take it up a notch,
Yes.
in this series,
Defensively
especially.
especially.
Yeah, defensively is gonna be huge, so I hope that they stay pretty stable with their defensive pairings,
Don't forget about Connor
and
Bunnaman.
well, I said Connor
You
Bunneman.
did, I missed it, I am sorry.
Yeah, when I mentioned, Jerry Mayhew as familiar faces. But, yeah, I think that, defensively, this is gonna be a real challenge for the Phantoms, and so I'm really looking for the top defensive prospects. I want Ronnie Adder to be able to step up offensively. Adam Ginning has to do that shutdown role, like
Yeah,
we talked about in that pairing. And I think, while we have some guys who've been really strong scorers in Tyson Forster and Elliot Denoye this season, I think some secondary prospects are going to have to step up. um, we have Cooper Marody and, Garrett Wilson as the vets that have been pretty prolific,
is
but
Matt Brown really gonna play? Is there room for this guy?
I don't know. I really don't know.
That's why I worry about the real prospects here. The real prospects are the guys that you've been putting in years of development into, and these guys should be playing. That's what I'm worried
Yep.
about. By the way, another name to worry about, Jake Wise. He just joined Charlotte the last week, and he was an NTDP guy and then a college guy. He's already got points on the board for them.
Yeah. So we have game 1 tonight, and then game 2 is on Thursday, and then game 3 is an if necessary. That's Friday. The first round is a 3-game series. So wishing the Phantoms a lot of luck and hope that we get some strong play out of them so that the Phantoms can have a home game in
Yeah,
these playoffs.
yeah, they deserve that, but they got to get through this team first.
They do. All right, that will do it for today's show. Thanks for making us your first listen today. And everyday listeners, tomorrow on the show, we'll have probably some more on the Briere and Torts comments. I think there's a little bit more to dig into there. Plus,
Mhm.
our Flyers awards. The Flyers give out their own awards, but we have some awards that I think give more insight into the team than just top defenseman and most points and all that. So we're going to give those out. Plus, we'll have our mailbag. And so if you want your question answered on the show, you can tweet us at Locked On Flyers, email us at lockedonflyers@gmail, or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.